I don't know anything about cryptocurrency, but $500 million is a lot of money.
Fewer death threats, I assume, against you?
Your job is to cover all the investigations and arrest of the Yakuza. 3 months into it, I ended up living in this Zen Buddhist temple.
How did you end up there?
So today we are joined by two very, very special people. My guest host today is Michelle Young. Michelle is a brilliant writer who has an award-winning book called The Art Spy right now, which is being translated all over the world. Michelle spends so much of her time crisscrossing the country, speaking, doing guest lectures and whatnot. She is a television personality. She's an amazing writer. She teaches at Columbia Graduate School of Architecture. No, this woman's not too busy. A Harvard graduate. She has 2 children, and she's married to a very, very handsome Frenchman. And she's just a wonderful gal. And she's offered to help us today interview Jake. And so, Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you quickly.
Before you say anything, Michelle, I wanted to say I really enjoy The Art Spy. And I was introduced to the book by Bianca Vanderbos, who writes the blog Book Notions. I read the Q&A, and then I started reading the book, and I was like, this is just wonderful, wonderful stuff. But I have not finished, so don't spoil it for me. Like, don't tell me anything about the book.
That means a lot, because I'm also really enjoying your book. So I finished Tokyo Vice, and now I'm in The Devil Takes Bitcoin, and excited to read all of that stuff. But I think my first question is, A, you've made a career out of being a journalist and author, writing about the Japanese underworld, but how did you end up there in the first place, in one of the most notoriously hard places for the gaijin, the outsider, to break into, not just to live there, but to work there?
I mean, I had a great interest in Japan, but from like this nerdy interest in karate, which got me interested in Japan and Zen Buddhism. This is the long and fast version. I got to Japan as an exchange student after sort of negotiating my way into getting there without much Japanese experience. 3 months into it, I ended up living in this Zen Buddhist temple with my cranky Zen master Ryogen, who wasn't my Zen master at the time. Fully immersed in this little neighborhood, in this little temple, and doing zazen and doing very Japanese things. I entered the newspaper kind of on a lark because I had a year of college left and I wanted to give myself some reason to study. So I knew newspapers here hired people on the basis of how well they did on examinations. So let's see how well I do. So I did better than I expected. And then I got assigned to cover, I started on the police beat like everybody else. And one thing led to another. And, by year 2, I was covering organized crime. That was like my beat. Like, here's the Saitama Police Department. Your job is to cover all the investigations and arrest of the Yakuza and anything involving them. And, I think by my second year, or even in my first year, I met a Yakuza boss. There's a long chapter in the book, Bury Me in a Shallow Grave, about, actually being summoned to a Yakuza office because Kaneko Naoya-san, this guy, and the Sumiyoshi guy was having issues with the police and thought I could be his intermediary to find out why the police were being so standoffish. I mean, what is so crazy about Japan, and if you watch the TV series, you understand this, is that the relationship between the reporters and the police and the Yakuza is very, very almost weirdly friendly. Like, you can go from all sides, right?
That's one of the things that really surprised me. I didn't really know about any of that part of Japanese society, even though actually my family is Taiwanese, but from the Japanese occupation time period. So my grandparents speak Japanese and are very Japanese. My grandfather actually survived the atomic bomb in Hiroshima during World War II. So it's like the language and the culture's been around in my house, but I didn't know anything about this. So the tie between the 3 groups was fascinating. And the most fun thing was when you repeatedly explained that if there's going to be a raid, they let everyone know, including the people being raided.
You know, what is interesting is that, we're talking about the Yakuza and Taiwan, is that the Yakuza have always been a meritocracy. So they've been open to the Chinese and to Koreans. And that's why there's a huge number of the population that are the Yakuza that are Korean Japanese and Taiwanese Japanese. I think there are some high-ranking members of the Inagawa-kai that are Taiwanese. I mean, all the way up to like number 2.
Wow.
So, I mean, I always thought that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
By the way, wow, Taiwan's such a hot topic in Japan after Takaichi said basically an attack on Taiwan is an attack on Japan.
I know. I mean, that is, well, from the Taiwanese side, very incredible development. My parents, go to the UN every year and and say we want representation. And so it's a very important topic to Taiwanese Americans
Well, I mean,
as well.
I have an incredible dislike for Takaichi as a person and as a prime minister and her predecessor Abe. But on the Taiwan issue, I'm like, wow, I'm agreeing with Takaichi-san. This is very hard for me to say. Like, well done, Takaichi.
Yeah, and I think especially given the history of Japan's colonial ambitions in Taiwan and stuff, just, it all coming full circle. I also wanted to ask you about being an outsider in general in Japan. Was it, in some cases, helpful?
Yes, it was very helpful.
Because I discovered that in my small way with the Art Spy, is that once they kind of got over that I was American, they thought, oh, actually, we can tell them things.
Right.
They're not part of the culture.
When you're kind of an outsider, there's a sense maybe that you can talk to this person and it's not going to go back into the community, that you're more likely to keep your mouth shut, right? And that you can kind of become a confessor role. So you're a journalist, but you're also an outsider. And there's a sense that, maybe that's better, that's easier to talk to you. And then also people over-explain, right? Because there's this kind of assumption. First of all, this underlying assumption that as a foreigner, you don't quite understand what is being said to you. I often get this look. Even now, is you're talking to someone, or you're calling someone on the phone, and when I'm speaking Japanese, it's very deep masculine Japanese voice, like, and it's like, and so suddenly they look up and it's like, oh my God, like, hey, look, the dog can speak. I've been having a conversation with a speaking dog.
It's that foreign, right?
Yeah. So it's like, well, I better explain this well, because obviously the dog is on all fours, so it doesn't see the world from the 2 foot the 2 feet standpoint. This is really fun. I love these Yakuza fan magazines because nothing captures the absurdity of the organized crime in Japan as the fact that you had these magazines you could buy every month that list all the Yakuza bosses coming out of their meetings, and here they all are with their rank. And
can you imagine the mafia doing that? Can you imagine?
Yeah, like the Cosa Nostra.
Costa Nostra Times,
Yeah.
This month's editorial, how unfair of them to put Gotti away for this many years. I mean, sure he did it, but still. So about 30% of the Yakuza are Korean Japanese because they're discriminated against. They didn't have the same opportunities that the normal Japanese people would have in society, but the Yakuza are meritocracy, right? So you can go up in that organization. And then there's also Burakumin, which were kind of the outcast class of Japan, the people that dealt in slaughtered animals or dealt in leather or did jobs that were considered unclean. Now, discrimination against them has kind of waned out. It's like nobody cares anymore, except maybe in Kyoto. But they're also kind of this outcast class that also, a lot of them ended up in the Yakuza because they faced discrimination because of where they geographically came from, or their ancestors remember this class. Mm-hmm. So I realized with the Korean Yakuza, that it's sort of, when I would talk to them, you sort of get a suss where they are, and I'd be like, okay, like you are, by all, physiologically you're pure Japanese. You speak Japanese fluently. You've grown up in Japan. Mm-hmm. Yet because you're Korean, you get blamed for everything and you're discriminated against, and people, say you reek of garlic, and they say these discriminatory things about you, and they blame you for all of Japan's problems. And so you guys are like the Jews of Japan, and I'm a Jew. So we have a lot in common. And they'd be like, yeah, you understand our plight. And it was really good. So in that sense, it was very helpful. And so I play that card a lot, like, you, and, like we in a sense, we're in the same situation here. I'm a foreigner, you're a foreigner,
Can you tell us a little bit about your interest in crypto? I mean, your recent book, which is phenomenal, and Michelle just talked about it. The devil takes Bitcoin.
Oh yeah. So it was such a absolutely like nothing I'd done before, and the genesis of covering cryptocurrency was like this. I don't know how many people know it, but the world's largest Bitcoin exchange was in Tokyo. It was called Mt. Gox. It was run by this Frenchman named Mark Karpeles, who was, this nerdy guy, who fascinated by Japanese anime and Japanese culture, who'd come to Japan and basically in the very early days of Bitcoin took over this exchange and launched it and made it very successful. I have no idea what Bitcoin is. And then in like 2014, somebody writes me, I think a friend from like college or something. He's like, hey, like, dude, there's this Bitcoin exchange in Japan that's about to go under, and everybody's talking about it. It's in Tokyo, and it looks like they've been hacked of a lot of money. And I'm like, okay, so cryptocurrency is worth money. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, so how much money we're talking? It was like $500 million worth of cryptocurrency hacked. I'm like, all right, I don't know anything about cryptocurrency, but $500 million is a lot of money. And I'm like, okay, I am on this story. So I call up my editor at the Daily Beast, and I'm like, hey, I give him the gist of what I'm hearing, and and there's been some stuff leaked on the internet, and we had the sort of the same conversation, like, okay, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, don't really get it, but there's been an article in Forbes in it, and it was used on the Silk Road, and now this exchange is about to go under with like $500 million of Bitcoin missing. Like, that's a good story. And so, I reach out to friends of friends, and then and Japan has this like vibrant Bitcoin community. There's like these meetups, and they're talking about all the cryptocurrencies I think one of the epicenters was this like bar restaurant called the Pink Cow. So I start going to these Bitcoin meetings, and I'm lucky enough to actually find someone who worked at Mt. Gox. They tell me how much has been hacked, what the plans are, and how poorly managed the company was run. So we slammed together this article. We put it out on the Daily Beast, and like 4 hours after the article comes out, Mt. Gox declares bankruptcy. So we're totally on this story. And my editor is very pleased because we're not really leading, but we're there. We're there, and we actually had a more accurate account of how much money was initially supposed to be missing. And shortly around that time also, Bitcoin prices plummet, but then Newsweek, which used to be part of the Daily Beast, who I'm writing for, comes out with this article where they identify the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. We have discovered Satoshi Nakamoto. We know who he is. It's like a huge scoop. Everybody's reporting on it. And John Avlin, who was like the editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast, he calls me up on my phone, and I'm like, he's like, hey, like Jake, it's John Avlin. I'm like, oh, editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast. He has to explain himself because I'm I'm like, I should know, but I don't really know. And I'm like, what's up, John? And I'm like, did I do something? Did I screw up really bad? And he's like, well, this Newsweek story, right? If they're right, great for them. But if they're wrong, let's kick their ass. So this Satoshi Nakamoto, like, he's supposed to be Japanese, right? Like, write whatever you can. Find out, is there a Satoshi Nakamoto in Japan? And I'm like, and it's a fruitless quest. I'm like, it's an unusual name. And there's, you look at these papers of the Bitcoin Foundation, and there's a kanji for Satoshi Nakamoto. So you're thinking, okay, So here's his paper written in Japanese, and the Japanese seems fairly well written. And there's kanji, so it must be a real person. And you're reaching out and you're trying to find, Japanese kanji combinations. That exact combination is like 3 or 4 people in the entire nation that match. And one of them is like a high school kid who's really into baseball. I thought maybe he's a math prodigy, but when I finally got I finally got a hold of school, I got a hold of his mother, I got him on the phone, and it was like I'm not very good at math, but I'm okay at baseball, and it was like, okay, it's not you. So we write that story, and in the process, I also discovered that the reason there is a kanji for Satoshi Nakamoto is because Mark Rapellis translated the seminal paper, the white paper that established, Bitcoin. And when he translated, he decided to come up with some kanji that he thought had meaning, which he just randomly gave to Satoshi Nakamoto. And so that became like his kanji name. And so I'm thinking this is really funny. And this is on the early days of Twitter when it was like a friendly community. So in like a parody of Spartacus, like I post like I am Satoshi Nakamoto, and I put the kanji for his name there, and suddenly I've got like 20 or 27 friends, we're all declaring we're Satoshi Nakamoto, and at that point, Twitter freezes. It stops allowing you to change your you have sort of an alias there to use the character Satoshi Nakamoto, and he can't do it anymore. And I have never changed my name back. So
so that's what it is on Twitter.
On Twitter, it's like Jake Adelstein, and then as you look at the kanji, Satoshi Nakamoto, and then there's my other bio stuff, and then my other alternative name is Satoshi Nakamoto. And every now and then I get like some right winger who's he's like, why are you pretending to be Japanese? How dare you pretend to be Japanese? Write this criticism of Japan. You're not Japanese. And I'm like, duh.
And do you know the backstory? Still waiting for Satoshi Nakamoto to stand up, right?
Yeah, we're still waiting for Satoshi Nakamoto to stand up. I mean, I have my theories about who he is. And one of the fun things about this book is The Devil's Age of Bitcoin is so you have the narrative arc of Mark Karpeles, this French guy, this otaku, creates this, the world's first Bitcoin exchange. But Mark is actually writing to Satoshi Nakamoto. I mean, they're exchanging messages. Like there's actually this connection. Everybody's connected. Mt. Gox connects the Silk Road. It connects Ross Ulbricht. It connects the agents who steal from it, and then eventually connects Mark to this special agent who works the case internationally, Tigran Gambarian. And it was fun, sort of like linking all these various threads together. And that's why I was telling Peter, writing this book was so much fun. Also, this is one of my few books where nobody dies.
Fewer death threats, I assume, against you?
No death threats, nothing. I mean, there's crime and there's stolen and there's tragedy and there is, and Mark Karpeles ending up in jail for a year, and there's definitely some high stakes stuff there, but there's no murders, no gangland shootings, no one throws a grenade into a hostess club. There's no bodies ground up and fed to dogs. It's.
But the key thing in these books is access, and it's made it very clear that you had that early on because you have Mark speaking to you. It's very clear that it's not repurposed quotes from something else. It's you and him have spoken.
I mean, I was here. The things that were lucky for me on this book was, I covered the high-tech crimes unit when I was in the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, and I'm always good about maintaining like those relationships with people that I've covered in the past. Even the police officers when I was covering organized crime, like I'm still hanging out with them, and I'm still like going to end of the year parties with them. Japan has these wonderful things called bonenkai, which literally mean forget the year parties, where you get drunk and and say everything that's been on your mind, and then the next day you pretend that you didn't.
Good place for journalists to mingle, right?
Yeah, it's like all off the record, but technically because like I forgot the year. What did you say last night? So I knew cops that were working the case, and that was great. I knew I got to know Mark well, and it took me, and literally, I think if you read the book, one of the things that's really hard to write a book like this is remembering what you didn't know when you didn't know it. So when you know actually what happened, right? You have to, as you're writing this book, to make it interesting with readers, you have to go back and remember, like, at this point in time, what was I thinking? And so you go through your emails and your stuff, like, oh, like, I thought he was guilty.
So when I read that he was French, I just chuckled because it's like, I feel like every wild story, whether it's like someone is climbing up a skyscraper with bare hands or like running the first huge Bitcoin that collapsed, it's like somehow a French guy is involved. So, and I told my husband, he's like, of course.
Yeah. I mean, of course a French guy's going to be involved. Like, that's how it has to be, right?
Yeah, and it's like the type of French guy that didn't fit into French society. So they've gone and done their thing elsewhere. And that's actually something that I've come to know really well, is there's like a way to be in France, like in some other cultures that are very strong and dominant. And then if you don't fit into it, you have to really like find your way or get crushed, in the process.
What is interesting is that early, Mark appears in this French documentary about hackers and computer culture. And I think the title is literally Suck My Geek. Like, it's a terrible title. When he was young, before he went to Japan, and he's like, and you realize he's actually kind of funny because he's like, they're sort of quizzing him about his life. His mother's in the interview little segment as well, and he's like, and at one point they ask him, like, do you have a girlfriend? He says, like, I have many girlfriends. They're all JPEG files. and I'm like, oh. And also Tigran Gambarian, who was investigating the theft of Mt. Gox as part of a greater series of thefts. I got to know him really well. And when I was writing this book, which originally I wrote this book, and it came out in French first in like 2019.
Oh, wow.
But when it came out, the trial of Mark Karpeles was still going on, right?
Yeah.
It came out like 4 days before his trial ended. So there was a lot of stuff I couldn't put in the book. And Tigran was still at the IRS as a special agent. So when we decided to do the English edition, I'm like, all right, I'm going to ask Tigran, can I go on the record? Can I use his name? And then I can add some more detail to the book. So I'm trying to reach out to Tigran, and I'm like, not getting any reply from his emails. I'm like, what's the problem? And the problem is that he is in prison in Nigeria.
Oh, no.
9 months in prison in Nigeria.
Yeah. When Tigran was in Nigerian prison, I was like writing him every day on WhatsApp, like, hey, man, how you doing? Because he finally smuggled a phone in there. And one of the things that is interesting about this book and why he's in the dedications is he's in this Nigerian prison basically because he's working for a company that Nigeria wanted to extort money from. I mean, that's my breakdown of it. So I'm working on the manuscript, and I'm like, hey, Tigran, would you like to take a look at the manuscript? Because it's not like you got anything better to do. And so I sent him the manuscript. And, there's this really dark time to be in prison unjustly accused. And I'm like, hey, Tigran, guess what? And he's like, what? I'm like, we're texting. I'm like, I've had a captive audience before, but I've never had a captive editor. Ha ha ha. I mean, the whole way this book was put together was just so bizarre.
It's very different, Michelle, than yours. I mean, Michelle, you spent 4 years researching your book.
I was dealing with nobody who was alive. I mean, there were some descendants, of course, that I had to speak to, but majority, I was sifting through boxes of documents and hoping the box you requested might have something you need. Sometimes they're not inventoried at all. So it's a different process. But now, the book I'm working now deals with people, so I'm learning.
I have just experienced this halfway, sort of the halfway of your dilemma. So I did a podcast called Witness Night Shift about a serial killer at the VA hospital where my father works in 1992. He probably killed 40 people.
Wow.
And it was very successful as a podcast. Like, for 1 week, we were the #1 podcast on Apple, to the surprise of everyone at Sony. And like we beat Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and the New York Times, the Daily. Like I just got to say that because it doesn't have it often. But this happened in 1992. So as Campsite Media and I are working on this project, like people that I want to interview, well, they would die, and I mean, it's really horrible. And I would be like, I'd be like, hey, like we need to hurry up because the people who can talk about this case are like, are in their 80s and they're passing away. And one of the central figures who was kind of this whistleblower, Dr. Christensen, had passed away before the podcast began. But I always knew that I was going to do it, so I had like 1 or 2 interviews with him. But he had left interviews with his daughter, like these posthumous interviews, which they gave him. So we sort of had this like voice from the dead. And I was like, and that's sort of where you are. I have boxes of documents and people who can't answer questions because they're no longer on this earth. And then people who were alive. So I had a mixture of both. And, it's...
Yeah, I had someone actually not die the day that I was going to interview her, but had a pulmonary embolism. And I got a message from the woman coordinating. It just said, "We may never see her again." That was the WhatsApp message.
Did you get to see her?
No, I didn't, because then she was in the hospital for several months. And it would have been an interesting person because she was like very supportive of like Rose's legacy, but actually really disliked her as a person. so it was like her ire could be superseded by how much she admired the work that my heroine did in the resistance, So it would have been great to speak to her, but it was like one of those things where it takes time to develop your contacts who then will introduce you to others, and you can't really rush that process, and so that's just how it played out.
That is an interesting dynamic when you have someone who admires the person but doesn't like them. And I discovered as I was working on this VA thing, so like talking to former prosecutor Kevin Crane, that my dad annoyed the out of him. I mean, I can't say it on there, right? This isn't like regular radio. I was like, he's like, yeah, your dad's a pain in the ass, Jake.
That's color though, right?
That's color.
Yeah.
Describe EGR to us.
Oh. So my lovable cranky Zen master, who has no filter, and actually was really lovely hearing the eulogy at his funeral, because I lived there as a student for like 3 or 4 years, and then there was a guy who came after me, and he ended up becoming a serious Zen Buddhist priest, and he was talking about like how Ryogen said whatever was on his mind, and that he really didn't like ceremony, and that Japanese people are tend to sort of ritualistic ceremony and sort of have this kind of tendency not to say what's on their mind, but engage in formalities. And one of the things I always thought was really funny about Ryogen is that when I first went to the temple, is this thing in Japan when you bring someone a gift and you say "Tsumaranai mono desu ka?" Like, this is like a worthless gift that I have brought to you, like, and so I brought him like something that's like "Tsumaranai mono desu ka?" And he was like, it's worthless. I don't want it. Take it home. Why would I want something that's worthless? And I'm like, oh no, it's actually like these really expensive cakes. And he's like, well then just say like, here's a gift. Here's a gift. I brought you a gift.
That's just culturally very Asian. I mean, very Japanese, but just the always wanting to subsume the humility is more important. But then you're saying the opposite of what you're saying. Yeah,
and he was like, he just didn't jive with that, which was probably why we were a good combination. But I saw him before I went on my this book tour for the book. I saw him on his birthday. We had a very he really was not feeling very well, and I had to sneak into the hospital room past like the nurses to get it to see him. And we had a nice, very typical conversation, which was kind of like, how's your lady doing? I'm like, she's doing great. And he's like, don't screw it up. And he's like, you have this test coming up next year, which you have to pass to eventually sort of take over the temple. And I'm like, I understand. And he's like, don't worry about failing. Just do your best. It's fine. Like, no pressure on you. But I knew that he wasn't doing well. And so I was coming back to St. Louis to see my family and do my last book tour. And I'm sitting next to this guy who's, sort of, kind of got the 5 o'clock shadow, and he's got like some Japanese tattoos on his arm. His name's Joe Sullivan, so he's a pastor. And I started talking to him, and we had this very interesting conversation because I could tell he's very bright. So we're on this plane. I'm sure we're annoying everyone around us because we're having this long discussion of like, how was the Bible put together, and why do Protestants hate the Epistle of James, which tells you have to feed the poor and take care of the sick, and what's it like having MAGA members in your congregation, and and I'm like, okay, and I'm explaining to him like, here's my situation, like I'm the only last disciple of my master. I'm not even that sure about the metaphysics of Buddhism, but I've taken this on, and I may have to deal with the congregation. And like, what is the advice? If you've been doing this for years, so what is your advice? And he's like, well, he says, in every congregation, you're going to have one person that is very difficult to deal with, and that is going to take a lot of your time, and you just gotta understand that there's always somebody who's kind of an attention seeker, maybe a little bit of a troublemaker, but often they mean well. And I was like, do you have some kind of like pastor, slang or terminology for people like, for people like that in the congregation? We have like words in the newspaper things for people who are like a pain in the ass in Japanese, and he's like, oh yeah, like the word is EGR. And I'm like, what does EGR mean? And he said, extra grace required. And I just love it. I mean, I took it back.
I'm going to start using that.
Yeah, he's a little bit
Because it's the same
EGR.
thing in companies, right? Not just congregations. There's always one person that you're like, why am I spending this inordinate time? Like making them feel better.
and it's kind of a cute phrase because it's like it's a positive way of spinning it extra. You're going to need some help from the Almighty to deal with this person.
Yeah. How has it been to see your writing turn onto the big screen with the HBO series?
I had, many authors have had a terrible experience with their work being adapted. I really like Pachinko, and I know Min Jin Lee, but I don't think she's very happy with the adaptation. But my experience was wonderful because the showrunner, J.T. Rogers, and I went to high school together.
Oh, amazing.
And really, he's kind of the reason the whole show got greenlit, because in 2017, he won the Tony for this play called Oslo, which is this dark comedy about the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks taking place in Norway. It's a dark little piece. And, in Hollywood, when you sort of win the Tony, you have this moment of grace where people are like, what do you want to do, JT? Because you won an award that we all know. He's like, I want to do Tokyo Vice as a series. And he had already kind of convinced Ken Watanabe to sign on. And then Ansel really wanted to do it. And there was another actor who was actually, I think, on the top of the list. But Ansel was so enthusiastic that I was like, if Ansel wants to do it, let's let Ansel do it, because we need someone who's going to commit. That this is a priority for them, that if he's really willing to learn Japanese, and he did an amazing job, it would be good.
Wow.
So there were times that I got frustrated with the scripts that were sent to me and storylines that were developed, but mostly we were able to work it out. And the thing that made it the best for me is that Mari Yamamoto is an actor, but she was a journalist first. She is currently starring in Rental Family next to Brendan Fraser. And she's also on Apple TV's Monarch Legacy Monsters as Dr. Miura. But, I met Mari at a time when she just came back to Japan, and she was like between jobs. And so we did a lot of work together for the Daily Beast. And so she's a good writer. She understands Japan. She's bilingual. And, she understands production as well. And so she was put in the writer's room as interpreter, consultant. And so basically on the front line of the script, when it was Mari, Yamamoto, who is credited as associate producer in second season, basically being like, keeping things in line, keeping it authentic. And one time she actually reached out to me and he's like, Jake, like one of the writers has convinced them that the Russian mafia was a thing in Japan, and they're all excited about the Russian mafia storyline. Please nip this in the bud. And I'm like,
Yeah.
absolutely. There was never a Russian mafia presence in Tokyo. Never happened. Completely fictional. I don't know what idiot is saying that is real, but it's not. And, so I called JT. I'm like, JT, Yakuza versus Russian mafia storyline. No, absolutely not. And he's like, but this guy says, and I'm like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's like, is there a world in which maybe, there's like a, Russian mafia group, a little small little group that takes power and, and they have a conflict with the Yakuza? I said, yes, there's a world, JT, where that happens, and all the Japanese are green and all the foreigners have horns coming out of their head. But not on this earth, JT, not on this earth. No.
You might be surprised that in the documentary world, I've had this experience and it's like Arte and, and they will have me on there as an expert. And I remember one time they were like, all right, we need you to say that Little Italy in New York is just like Disneyland. And I was like, I just can't say that because it's not even just in the literal way, but I'm like, I don't even get the comparison. And so they made me redo that take over and over. And I kept trying to skirt it. And then I think finally I said something like, I don't know. I didn't say it. I just couldn't do it. Like as a journalist, I was like, I can't say it. And so they kind of like gave up. So I was cut from the documentary.
Oh.
But I've which is fine. But I've experienced this in other documentary sets too. They're like, we just need you to say this. And then they'll say, but that person, some other person said that it's true. And I was like, well, I mean.
Yeah. I'm like, no. I've had the same thing on documentaries. It's like, where they want you to say something that's just bonkers or not true. And
Yeah.
it's like can't like in your reality version of TV, like I'm fine walking into the room and pretending like I just walked into there for the first time because you didn't catch it on camera. Like, okay, at that level of but I'm like, I'm not gonna say that, I'm not gonna say that when you leave the Yakuza you have to leave a finger behind. It's a great line. That's not true.
Yes.
Not true.
Right.
Can't say it.
Well, they want to embellish it, right?
Yeah. My last question is about this idea of loss, disappearance. I know it's in Tokyo Vice, but it's also in one of the podcast series. You what is it called? The evaporated part. Yeah. How is that, just like from a personal perspective, either sources or people that disappearing over the course of your work, not necessarily because of your work, but it seems to be a theme,
I mean, it's really when Yogan, I mean, he died of natural causes, but I was just thinking of like all the people that I have known over the years who are just like gone. I mean, they're dead or they don't know where they are. I mean, the worst thing about people disappearing is that enclosure is such a bad word, but you're always in limbo. You're like, maybe they're out there, maybe they're still alive, and that it's incomplete. It's like I think that it's well documented that what bothers people is not knowing, is like having, if you're in the middle of a phone call and suddenly it cuts off, right, and you were never able to continue that phone call again, you'll think about that phone call forever because it's not completed. It hasn't wrapped up.
Yeah.
But one other thing that I have begun to think about over the years is, so one person in my life who vanished called me one Christmas and basically explained sort of like, it's sort of your fault that I had to vanish. But I want you to know that I am okay and that I don't hold it against you, and I understand that's how things worked out. But at the same time, like, please respect my right to be forgotten, my right to be vanished. Like that, I have a family now. I don't want them to know what I used to do.
Okay.
And Japan has introduced what they call the My Number card, which is a social security card that has your photo on it. And for years in Japan, you never needed a photo ID. Most people don't have a driver license. Everything you could do was with like your registration at the offices or your health insurance card, which doesn't have a photo on it. And it was surprisingly easy in this country to vanish or assume someone else's identity or buy their family register. And now that you have to have this card to get your health insurance and to get a phone, and it's basically required this photo ID that is definitely locked and digitally fingerprint and all these things. I think it's kind of a shame that I think that there is a right to be forgotten. That if people are going to start over, that they need to vanish sometimes.
Yeah, it's that and the internet trace.
Yeah.
It's so hard to really scrub that.
I mean,
I don't even know where you begin.
Things do disappear from the internet, but
yes.
There are people who still buy books. There's fewer and fewer of them, but I'll often see that, especially a couple of years ago, that if you were looking for the manual of disappearance, you would often find it bundled with the manual of suicide.
Wow.
And the manual of suicide is still in print. I mean, if you go to a used bookstore, you can always find a copy, or in many bookstores. And it was kind of like, that is the choice. Do you kill yourself and escape from this world of shame, or the forces that are seeking to harm you, or do you vanish? And I'm always like, well, vanishing is probably the better option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't like either of those options.
I understand that the romance of vanishing, and I met people who have completely erased their past and start over. Usually, they make the same mistakes, right? I think I'm borrowing from a Harry Chapin song. Like, you can go 1,000 miles and still stay where you are, because people tend to repeat the same mistakes. But sometimes, you change your name, you change your life, and that changes who you are. And I think that's one reason like people leave their hometown, because you're always going to be, trapped in the memories of people as you were, rather than the person you are now.
Very true.
I know someone that walked out of a cult just one day. He was ostensibly going shopping and just never came back. That, I don't know, this conversation reminds me of that, like that decision that you take, and then the need to be forgotten by that, what the world that you lived in before.
Well, I hope that you guys don't do that.
Yeah, with this face and this nose, that's not going to happen, man.
And Facebook was created in my dorm in college. My digital trace is like, it's going to take too much to remove. Yeah.
I screwed the pooch on that one. There was a time when there were almost no photos of me on the internet that were recent, and I was like, and I was thinking, this is very fortunate for me. But I fell into the publisher's thing, like, you have to have a social media presence to sell your books. So.
Yeah.
Here we are, Michelle. Like, both of us, we're very visible.
You're very famous, both of you, and you're very successful, and you're both brilliant. And I really thank you for coming on. Michelle, is there another question? Is there anything else that you'd like to ask Jake? Or?
I mean, of course, there's many, but I feel like it's like...
And Jake, thank you so much. Michelle, thank you. You were both wonderful. Jake, thank you for your time. I know it's very late in Japan right now.
Sorry to be.
No, it's okay.
Late.
I'm gonna manage to get the last train home, I think, if I'm lucky.
Oh.
And the trains here stop really early. I mean, it's crazy. By
yeah.
the way, if either of you make it to Japan, give me a heads up. We have a guest room.
I would love to. Yeah.
Ms. Nakamura, Jesse, allows me to have people at the house for at least 3 days. That's it. That's the rule.
I would say Michelle probably has a better chance of getting there before I do, but okay.
Well, I will be in Taiwan in April, bringing my kids.
Come by Tokyo. It's fun.
Yeah.
Wow.
April's cherry blossom season.
I know. It's
That's awesome.
We're proud to be sponsored by Litchfield Distillery. They like to call themselves Batchers in honor of the early farmers of Northwest Connecticut, a region known for its ample yield of wheat, corn, and barley. Growing these crops in the rocky terrain requires grit and determination. For the past decade, Litchfield Distillery has been busy distilling Litchfield County's best harvest into fine craft spirits, one batch at a time. Litchfield Distillery, the spirit of hard work.